Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out for our operating budget testimony workshop. But we're going to start out, as promised, with a session with District 39 Senator Nancy King, who is going to share with us her perspective on the ongoing work of the Kirwan Commission, which is also known as the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, and is looking at sort of revolutionizing the way we deliver public education in Maryland and taking a really hard look at what do we need to do to make Maryland a system of public education that is the envy of the world. And then she's also going to give us some background on the NOT Commission, which is another commission looking at public school construction funding. And Senator King is, I have to say, one of my very favorite elected officials. And first of all, because she's so responsive and she's so smart, but also because she is a former MCCPTA president. And so she gets the work that we're doing. She gets the way that we're trying to represent 206 schools, almost 162,000 students. We are now the 14th largest school system in the nation. And the work that we do is hard, and we try to cast a wide net, and we try to also be very substantively deep, and it's hard in a system of this size with all of the issues and things. And so having somebody like Nancy that we know is in Annapolis, chairing our Senate delegation, sitting on important commissions like the Kirwan Commission and the NOT Commission, makes me feel, comfortable that our interests are very well looked after. So she's going to start and talk to us about Kirwan and NOT. Help yourself to some food over here, and there will be lots and lots of time. We're going to make this more of a discussion, so there are going to be lots of opportunities for questions and just all that kind of stuff. So thank you again for coming, and I'm turning it over to I want to call you Doctor, to Senator King.
Thank you. Thank you. Since we're videoing this tonight, I have to stand up here at the podium, but I really would like to kind of make this a really interacting meeting tonight so that you can feel free to ask me any questions or give me your opinions or that kind of thing. I really want it to be open. And I have to say, starting out, and I'm looking at all you sitting at the table, that I sat in your seat so many years ago, and the reason that I got involved at the county level of the PTA, I actually started in the Xerox room at Stedwick Elementary School. I tell people that's where I got my career start. But I remember being at the pool and being at the grocery store and hearing people complaining about whatever it was, the complaint of the day with what they didn't like about the school system or what they didn't like about the curriculum or that kind of thing. And it ended up being that they were just standing there complaining to each other, and nothing happens from that. So I just kind of decided that I really wanted to be a decision maker. I wanted to do more than just complain to my friend at the pool that I didn't like what was happening. So I did get involved, and I have to tell you a story. I had the best corduroy pants and sweatshirts, and I wore them to volunteer at school all the time and was comfortable. Well, I found out that when I dressed up and changed, that the people in the administration started listening to me. Not that I'm telling everybody to go get dressed up, because I'm sure not, but it took a lot to go from being in that parent role to being in a role where they actually listened to me and listened to my opinions. Of course, then I ran for the school board, and then they had to listen to me. So, but anyway, that's just my little input on how I got to where I am. I'm on the Kirwan Commission. I had to be because it was my bill. When I wrote that legislation, I had no idea it would ever take on the life that it has taken on. We've got over 30 members on the commission, and we have been meeting once or twice a week for the last year and a half, and we're still not finished. We're going to have another year to go on with it. But some of it I'm really excited about, and some of it I'm not impressed with at all. We have a consultant who came to NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures, and really sold a couple of people about his knowledge of education. And he, from what I'm finding out, really doesn't have any other projects that he has completed, but he knows a lot. But what turned me off was that he started out by pretty much saying that the schools in Maryland aren't doing really anything right. And every time I confront him with it, he'll say, oh, well, you know, there's some good stuff that's going on, but he likes to give the impression that we're not doing anything right. Well, let me tell you, we have a fabulous school system, especially in Montgomery County. I know that, and I know the innovative things that we're doing. The Kerwin Commission is looking at doing more innovative things, and we have some great ideas that we're going to come out with. And one of the reasons, well, there are a couple different reasons why we didn't do a final report, why we didn't end it this year. One is political reasons, because we don't know what this governor will do with the report once we get finished with it. And there has been so much work put into it that we really don't want to see it put on a shelf and just set aside. So that's one of the reasons why, is just for the pure politics of it all. But also because we have some of the initiatives that we're working on are going to take a real education process with the public. I think we can do some things. We can't just push it out there. You know it's already happened 1,000 times. You can't put something new out there and not explain it to the PTA and to the parents. They have to be able to understand what's going on with it. For example, one of the things that we're really excited about is this whole idea of early college, and MCPS is already doing some of it. Jack Smith I've met with him a couple different times. He's doing it already in a couple schools. But what we want to do is have a checkpoint at the end of 10th grade, so that if it's a student who is not performing well, who would go to a community college and have to take remedial courses, we can catch them in 10th grade and theoretically give them the services, the helps that they need, so that by the time they do graduate in 12th grade, they can read and write and don't have to take the remedial courses at the community college. And what we're finding, we're trying to get more kids to go to college, but the kids that go to Montgomery College and have to take these remedial courses that they have to pay for, that they don't get credit for, by the time they get into those courses, find out they're not going to get credit for it, they lose their enthusiasm and they drop out. So we've lost them. And once we lose them, it's really hard to get them back. So if we can do this remedial stuff at the end of 10th grade into 11th and 12th grade and actually get them out more successful, that's a huge plus. But on the other hand, for the kids that do pass that checkpoint, that have done really what they need to do to graduate, they can start this early college program, and by the time they end their senior year, they can get an AA degree. So I'm not even sure what schools Jack Smith said that he's doing that with, but there are a couple, and he's going to expand it a little bit more next year. So we're very excited about that. Another thing we're really looking at is the pre-K, to try and expand that. We're kind of moving away from calling it universal pre-K because some kids don't need it, but a lot of kids do. Some parents want it. It was just like all-day kindergarten. Some parents want it, some do not want it. So what we're trying to do is calling it, instead of universal pre-K, calling it available pre-K, so that anybody that needs those services, and being the grandmother, I pay more attention to this now. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter who went to preschool for a 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old program. I'll tell you, it gets them so ready for kindergarten, and that's where your education gaps starts. And we know that. It's not like it's new. We know that. And it's so hard for kids to catch up if they haven't had the advantage of at least 1 year of preschool, maybe more. We know that we don't have the space in most areas, most counties, Schools just don't have the room to put pre-K in a lot of schools. So we're also looking and trying to be creative about where we can put schools like that, and trying to find some way to incentivize parents to put their kids in preschool, be it a tax credit or something. We kind of were joking at a meeting the other day about calling them pre-K vouchers, but you say the word vouchers and everybody has a heart attack. Just because the governor's pretty prone on private schools and vouchers and that kind of stuff, and we do not want to go down that road. So anyway, pre-K is one of the big issues that we're really looking at. I'm going to have a bill in this year for child care subsidy, and I just noticed in this tax bill that they voted on in Capitol Hill last night, they're putting money in for a child care subsidy. I don't know how much exactly yet, but so if we could get something more out of that and out of the state level. We're just finding that and I'm in talking to businesses and stuff, it's almost at a crisis point because people are desperate for childcare, affordable childcare. So we have to find some way to fix it. And we're kind of at the bottom of the pile across the country as for what we do for childcare. We make more money than about any other state, and we don't spend it on the people that need it the most. So that's one of the issues. As far as education funding goes, that's another interesting topic, and people have been so worried about the report, the Augenblick report that came out last year that said that because of the wealth in Montgomery County, we should be getting like $36 million less in school funding. They also recommended there were 3 counties that shouldn't get any school funding, which, I mean, to put a report out like that is so ridiculous just doesn't make any sense. And we should have really, had we thought about it, we would have had the commission first and then commissioned the study after that with the input from the commission, but that didn't happen. Anyway, we have 4 people from Montgomery County on the Kerwin Commission. Rich Madalino is on there, Ann Kaiser, Craig Rice from the County Council, and me. And we've talked a lot about it. In fact, I was joking with the Senate President about it yesterday. There are a lot of things they're going to need all of the votes from Montgomery County on coming up in the next year or two. And they know already we are not going to take less money home for education funding. If anything, we're going to take more home. So that's the battle that we've already started to talk about and looking at it. It's all political. I hate to say it, but it is, and we'll be working that. But like I said, they will need us for a lot of things. They need us for budget votes, and we will not be supporting. Our whole delegation will be in line to make sure that we get the funding that we need. So we don't know what the formula is going to be yet. We're just kind of, that part is coming in the next year. So we'll see how that ends up being. Trying to think what else is on the Kerwin that you need to hear about. Anyway, let me just give a quick rundown on the Knott Commission, which has really been interesting. Martin Knott has been the chairman of it, and I don't know if any of you know him, but he's a really interesting character. And I was on a conference call with him a few weeks ago, and I heard this strumming noise, and he was strumming on a banjo while he was talking to me on this conference call. And he's just a real interesting guy. But he has gone all over the state and visited schools and looked at how projects are done. And the main idea that we got together to do the Knott Commission was we're trying to take the politics out of the decision-making process for building schools. We're looking at the growth in Montgomery County, the growth in Prince George's County, the lack of growth in other counties. We just need to be smart about it, build good schools, and leave the politics out of it. Of course, I'd like to leave the politics out of a lot of stuff, but anyway, with the IAC, the whole idea of the Board of Public Works with the governor making all these superintendents come down there to the Begathon and I mean, they talked about people being punished, school systems being punished if their superintendent didn't show up and if they didn't bring elected officials with them and everything, and it just was so childish. But we're really trying to move away from that kind of thing. We're trying to find ways to speed up the whole process for building permits and that kind of thing, so that we don't have to go to the Board of Public Works to get change orders approved. Local school systems, and especially Montgomery County, the way we build schools, we do not need to go to the state to get a change order approved. And that's silly, and it just takes so much time. So we're trying to find ways to get the whole process speeded up a little bit. The whole idea of, Montgomery County has done such forever, has done the forward funding. That's how we get our projects done. Sometimes it takes a long time to get the state to pay up on it, but they do. We're fortunate that we've got the money to do that. I get some grief about it in Annapolis, because that just starts the whole conversation about our streets being paved in gold. But we are so fortunate to have the system that we've got. Montgomery County just builds really good schools. So, and plus it's only about, I think maybe 12% of our school construction money that actually comes from the state. So the state should not be making decisions about our schools any more than, I mean, it should be less than what they're doing right now. So that's part of what we're talking about. I've got the draft we finished last week, and it's going to print and will be out, I think, by the end of the month. I don't think there's anything really that major earth-shaking with it. We're just trying, like I said, to clean it up and take the politics out a little bit. The governor's not happy with that, because he wants people to come to the Board of Public Works and plead their case and all that kind of thing. But, and what we're finding, I guess I can say this, we had all the superintendents on board with us, all of them across the state, as far as making some changes and changing the way we do the process. They all got phone calls. And so our superintendent is fine. Jack Smith isn't scared of the guy, but everybody else is. So it'll be very interesting to see how we end up implementing the whole not report, because we'll just see whether anybody has the backbone to stand up with us to do it. So that's where we are. Yes, sir.
Hello. I had a couple of different questions.
Yes.
So on the Kerwin Commission, you talked a little bit about the consultant. Was the consultant, was that contract out to bid? Is that consultant just answerable to the chairman, or how did we suddenly select a?
Well, it's all kind of interesting, because I did not select him. I would not have. He came to the National Conference of State Legislatures and gave quite a presentation. And Rich Madalino and one of our staff people over there just fell in love with the guy. But I mean, he does not see anything positive that we do, and he compares Maryland schools with schools in Singapore. Well, it's like comparing apples and oranges. And Singapore doesn't even educate all their kids. They pick the best ones and they educate those. And we educate all of our kids, every kid that comes to our door. So there's a huge difference.
Was it a no-bid contract, or how did?
My guess is that it was a no-bid contract, and from what I hear, it was like he's making like $200,000 doing this thing.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit. So we heard it last night when the superintendent presented his operating budget. We heard it. We've been hearing it all year, actually, from the county council as well. There appears to be sort of a shift in, I don't know if blame is the right word, but there's concern that we as a county don't get an adequate share of state resources. So, we started out reacting to the Kerwin Commission's, the consultant's report, sort of laughing about it, and not even being that concerned. and then assuming that, you know, the formulas work relatively okay, so why should we mess with them, to now, you know, being openly challenging the notion that, you know, we're responsible for 40% of the enrollment growth in the whole state, and yet proportionately we're getting very little in terms of capital improvement funding. I guess the domain of the.
Well, we got 56 million last year, and if you look at the formulas, we are getting a huge chunk of that. And the enrollment growth is figured into the formulas as far as the education funding goes. The county council and county executive have always loved to say that we didn't bring enough money home, but if you look at the formulas and you look at the amount of money that we do bring, it's sizable. And we are bringing a very fair share home.
So they also said, like, was it 17%? What's the statistic? It's something like 17. But we only got 13% of the actual funds. No, that's CIP budget, and then on the operating budget, similar concern that last night it seemed like the superintendent was suggesting that we're going to have to dip into our reserve fund because of a lack of available funds. He had a chart that shows a declining rate of increase from the state, that we've seen the increase of funding from the state decline year by year by year on the operating side as well. And so I guess
It's kind of a football, I think, really. I mean, looking at it from my end, we are bringing home a decent amount of money. One thing I do want to mention, and I think it's going to be my bill, we are going to have legislation this year that says that the money coming from the slot machines is going to go directly to the Education Trust Fund. We're not going to put part of that money. We don't want to put that money into the general fund. We want that to go to the Education Trust Fund.
I have a question. It has to do with the funding formula. So the amount that we ask from the state for capital budget, because of our affordability, you know, in this county, we get, I think, 50% of the ask. I was told that Howard County was just changed up to 51 or 52%. Is this true?
That's not my understanding.
Okay, because I heard from
They have.
another.
I would be surprised. I have not heard that. I mean, we haven't done anything this year yet, so no.
Okay, so I didn't know if
I'm on the capital budget committee too.
Okay, excellent. I heard from another delegate, so I just figured I'd ask someone that would
No.
be very familiar with this. Also, is there any chance that could ever change for Montgomery County, that we would, you know, looking at how we are fiscally this year, would that ever be looked at to change to get a bigger percentage?
This is our time. If there's ever a time for us to change it, this is the year to do it. And that's why for the NOT Commission, I think it's that report is kind of done. But as far as the Kerwin goes, this is our chance to change whatever formulas that we need to change. So I'm not saying never. First, the Department of Legislative Services told us that we were going to have a $700 million deficit to start out with this year, and we have the budget first in the Senate. Yesterday, they told us it's about $240 million, which, yay, it's $240 million, but whoa, $240 million. It's still a deficit of $240 million. So, and things are not coming in. The gas tax has not come in like we thought it would come in. The income taxes are not coming in like we thought they would. So it's not like we're going to have a whole lot of extra money to spend, but we're not in as dire shape as we thought we were going to be either.
Okay, thank you. Well, if no one else has a question.
There's a question down there.
For the pre-K schools, have you looked at other states who have, I'm from New York originally, but they have successfully implemented pre-K, and it has been, parents have really appreciated and have enrolled their children. I'm just wondering if we're looking at other models.
We're looking at some, in fact, we're looking at, there are so many private pre-Ks right now. A lot of them are in really bad financial shape because a lot of people have taken their kids and put them in public schools, but there are resources available for pre-K. We just have to find a way to get to pay them to do that. I think that's the only way we're going to be able to go as far as space goes, because we don't have room in all of our schools to.
You're thinking of, instead of creating them in school, or that we may be
Doing some kind of a tax credit, even for paying for, and the thing is, we've got a request in to the AG's office right now to find out. We don't know if we implement public pre-K, we don't know if the Constitution will allow us to charge anybody for it. That's what we've got to figure out. If it's all got to be free, then we've got to figure out how we pay for it.
No.
So that's,
I was just thinking there are some other states who have implemented, so it might be good to look at other models of what people are doing.
yes,
What's
yes.
been successful. The other question I had is, having recently gone through the boundary study here in Richmond,
It's the most painful thing that I've ever been through,
It
yeah.
was very painful, but I think, we are healing and moving forward. But during that process, it sort of came to light that some of the students who are farm students who are in mainstream schools, some schools are doing well with those students, and some schools are not doing as well as we would hope. And then that got us digging further on how funds that the state is getting is allocated to low-income students and what additional support they're getting. And I read the OLO report that shows that there was a discussion in there about how the state gets funds and it's more discretionary. It doesn't have to go to those low-income students. So I was just curious to know if you are aware of this, and is there, I know that our superintendent is very much focused on closing the achievement gap and looking at how those funds are really used. A lot of these kids who are in need of additional support are not getting that when they're in some of these mainstream schools that don't have a large fund.
Well, another thing, and there's so many things in the Kerwin Commission, I'm just trying to remember it all to put out there. We're looking at a kind of a governance kind of structure where schools that get money for their special needs kids and for their special populations, whatever, that they're going to have to account for that. Schools really don't want to account for anything. They don't have to. But if we're going to put more money in for these programs, we want to be sure that the money is going to be spent for that. And I think that'll cover a lot of that, just that whole governance structure. One of the things that that this Mark Tucker talked about that kind of disturbed me through this whole Kerwin discussion was he talked about, we made the comment one day that if our teachers were properly trained, that we could have 60 kids in a class and that everything, they would be fine. And I guess if you're comparing the United States to Singapore, maybe that's the case, but I can't see 60 kids in a class any possible way here in where we are. But we have talked a lot about a career ladder for teachers, giving teachers way more training, putting more money into social workers. There are teachers right now, the teachers that I talk to, and I'm sure you do too, talk about the fact that we're expecting them to achieve so much in teaching our kids. But what we don't figure in is the amount of time they spend with those kids that, for one reason or another, disrupt the class or just can't concentrate or whatever the need is. We need to have more people in our classrooms that can help out with the kids that need help and still let these teachers actually be allowed to teach. We've talked a lot about whether we should talk about incentives, if we should pay teachers more and we've talked about this for a long time, for years. Should we pay teachers more that are teaching in the high need schools? I don't know. I think that we've got some really, really good teachers. When I was on the school board, many, many years ago, we developed the PAR program, the peer review program. And that first year that was implemented, we got rid of over 200 teachers that were not great teachers. And that program is still in place. And from what I hear in talking to principals and teachers, it still is working. If these teachers see a teacher that's struggling and needs some help, and they can help them learn how to manage better, or learn how to manage a classroom or whatever, and they can still be successful, those teachers need to stay. But if they're not able to manage the classroom, then they should move on to a different profession. So I just think that our teachers right now need a whole lot of help. And I don't think we pay them enough. I honestly do not think we pay them enough. So another thing we've talked a lot about is the paperwork. If teachers didn't have to do all that paperwork, it would be great, especially special ed teachers. The amount of forms, and even with computers, the amount of time they spend on reports and that kind of thing, instead of being able to actually plan their curriculum and teach, we make it very, very hard to be a teacher. So that's a lot of conversation has been put in on that on the Kerwin Commission. Yes.
Something I've noticed is that a lot of kids who are struggling that have means, almost all of them get tutors.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids that don't have the means don't get the tutors. I was in a room once when the new math curriculum was being implemented, and they asked for everyone whose kid was in either algebra or geometry in 8th grade, how many had tutors. And literally every parent raised their hand in the room, because that room was filled with privileged people, that had the funds. So is anything?
My district would not be that it would not be that way.
So is there anything in Kerwin Commission talking about after school?
That isn't something that has come up, but there are some really good after school programs that Baltimore City is really doing a lot after school. And I think Montgomery County does too. Yeah. But for the needier kids, I don't know what the resources are for them.
You mentioned that one of the things that the Current Commission is supposed to be doing a lot, we've got innovation and excellence, looking at how do we reform our method of actually educating, but also was to take a look at the Bridge to Excellence funding formulas that were kind of put in as a result of the work of the Thornton Commission back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So right now we have the sort of 5 basic areas of funding. Mm-hmm. And I know you all will not be recommending changes to the funding formulas now, but do you foresee, when you finish your work, that the Kerwin Commission will recommend changes to Maryland's methods of funding public schools?
Well, I'm going to tell you the real story here. The Kerwin Commission report is just that. It's a report, and it is a recommendation. None of what's in that report happens unless we pass legislation to make it happen. The report does not tell us what we have to do. We do not have to listen to anything in that report. I mean, I would hope that we do after all the time we spent on it. But the bottom line is, there will be legislation for anything that happens. As far as the funding formula goes, that funding formula will be politically driven. I guarantee it. And it will. I mean, there will be some major dogfighting over how it gets done. But it's how it gets done. So, I mean, there can be all the recommendations in the world, but then there's the reality of the fact that we're not going home with less money. So that's where it goes.
And I mean, I've kind of studied Maryland's public education funding structures fairly thoroughly. And, from looking at where we were in the, 90s and the gains that occurred after we switched to our current Bridge to Excellence funding formulas.
Which, by the way, was put in before we even knew how to fund it. And when that was passed, we didn't have a funding source.
Yeah, and I look at and to me, it looks like the basic premise underlying those funding formulas is pretty sound. And I know the governor hates them because he always wants to attack funding formulas, saying that they strip him from, strip autonomy from him. But we also know that almost all Maryland funding formulas that he has to adhere to are related to public.
Really make him angry, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just, when I read the consultant's report, the one thing that really struck me is the Thornton formulas that are in Bridge to Excellence work pretty well.
Yes.
So I don't know. I didn't know what the commission, to the extent you all have talked about.
We
is the
kind of
way we
stayed
fund
away
schools
from it
now.
right now. I mean, the commission is made up with over 30 people, quite a few of the governor's people. Rather than fight about it now, there's really no reason to fight about it. I mean, so we haven't. That will be coming up. It'll be coming up after the election. So, it's my guess.
Got any questions?
So I work on CIP issues. I'm the CIP chair, and so I really want to know, how can I help? I mean, is there anything in a not commission that will come out of it that we can help with? And actually, the same thing on the Kerwin side. How can us as PTA leaders help get Montgomery County some extra funds
Well,
to help us out through some of the rough times?
especially with the Kerwin Commission, when the time is right, if we get into an argument about how much Montgomery County is going to get, we will be calling out all the PTAs to rise up, and I mean, it'll be an all call if it comes to that. We've had the PTAs out. I don't know if you came. When was it? It's a couple of years ago, where we had PTA people all the way down Route Boulevard for as far as you could see. And I'm telling you, it does make a difference. It's a total pain in the neck for people to come to Annapolis on a Monday night. I always understand that. But it is so worth it, and your voices are heard. And when people, especially legislators, see their own residents down in Annapolis, they listen. Not just our people, it's across the state. So it is just really important to come down and let your voice be heard.
Well, I like Annapolis 'cause I was married there, so no problem.
Can I just say, if you follow, in this, Tricia Swanson is fabulous as far as following all the bills that affect Montgomery County, and she's really good at reporting back to the school board. But my years in Annapolis, when there are parents that come down, or students, especially students, people sit up and listen to what you have to say. We hear from lobbyists all day long, and you ignore them half the time. But when a parent or a student come down to talk about an issue, people really sit up and listen, and it does make a difference. It does make a difference. If you've got any high school seniors, make sure that they're looking for our legislative scholarships that come out. I think I've got about $56,000 to hand out in scholarships this year. You have to live in, it has to be in your own legislative district. You talk to your senator or delegates, but I give out usually $1,000 scholarships to high school seniors, as many as I can. I do some that are for for people that are going back to school, I've done that. But make sure they've done their FAFSA and make sure they get their applications into their legislators, because this is about the time we start thinking about it. And by April, they're all chosen. So think about that.
What kind of student you're looking for to apply? What's the application process like? What kind of?
Everybody's different. For me, I'm looking for, I look a lot for those students that might not get to go to school if they don't have a scholarship. But I do, if it's a student that is really hungry to go to school, I'm more than happy to support them. For some kids, I go to the high school principals and tell them, pick out that kid that you know could do well if he got to go to school and would never get to go, and I give them a full scholarship to Montgomery College. It's like $5,000 a year. It's a 4-year college, or a scholarship, so they can do the community college, they can go to USG for the last 2 years, and $5,000 is a lot to help them through school. So the scholarship money does some great things. I've just had great success stories. I had one girl that graduated from Gaithersburg High School at 17, and she had 2 children. And so I gave her a full scholarship to Montgomery College. She got a 4.0 the first year she was there, and she ended up graduating from Johns Hopkins Nursing School. So, yeah, so we have some good stories. We have great kids. We just have really great kids. Great, yeah. Uh-huh, it does. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's good. Probably one of the best things I do. Well, we have a website. We have a General Assembly website. You can go and put your address in, and it tells you who your legislators are. Mm. Everybody does it differently. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, some give it all to, like, the universities at Shady Grove. Some give it to Montgomery College so they don't have to mess with it. I like to mess with it because I like to see the kids that get my scholarships and urge them on if I can. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Board of education meetings,
Mhm.
a lot of us had a chance to see that there are a lot of schools in need, and our county only has but so much money, and I think the board is very sympathetic to a lot of the issues that we're having. I'm just wondering, do you feel like the folks at the state level understand the struggles? Like, we had schools that were talking about black mold. We had some students that were talking about, like, pipes with water flowing into the gym, like just really crazy things that you wouldn't expect in our
And
county.
it's all over the state, especially Baltimore City. I mean, there's some of the schools over there are just deplorable. I think everybody's aware of it. It's just trying to find. There'll never be enough money to do all that we need to do. We're just trying to just spread it out as best we can. Is where we are.
And are there possibilities? I know that we're looking at private collaborations with fields, right? Is there a way to think differently about?
Well, we've even, and we talked a lot about this, and I don't think we have any recommendations. I'm trying to think. I don't think any recommendations came out of the NOC Commission, but we've talked about trying to be creative about school buildings. Maybe we could rent a building, a school building, have a private company, private group buy the building. We could rent it from them for 100 years or whatever. So there's a lot of that, a lot of people looking at stuff like that. I know they are at the state level. I know the IAC is looking at it. we just know we have to be more creative. With Montgomery County growing at 2,500 to 3,000 kids a year, we can't, there's no possible way for us to keep up with the maintenance and building new schools at the same time. So the problem that we see, we build beautiful schools, but, and I hear this from parents, if we've got a beautiful Richard Montgomery, for example, okay, the school next door comes up and we say, okay, we're going to build it not quite as beautiful as Richard Montgomery, but you're going to have a school faster. People don't want it. They want the Richard Montgomery. And so it's hard to try to balance because they've got a beautiful school, why shouldn't I have it? But if we could build more schools and make it a little bit cheaper, would that be okay? People don't want it. So that's kind of one of the things we just couldn't find an answer to on the commission.
Can I piggyback on that for a second? Because I've been thinking about the HVAC issues a lot. It seems to be where mold starts is because of an inadequate HVAC system. And so do you think there's any chance we could work with other counties in Maryland that also have this competing factor and where kids and teachers are in sick buildings, so we can pump a little extra cash to get those updated at least?
There should be a way to do that, yes.
Because I think we would really love to see that. And I know, we want to concentrate on capacity, which is really important, but it's also really important that our kids are in, and again, teachers aren't leaving the day wheezing from the mold issues.
I just know we've learned so much over the years. When we first moved here and my kids went to Steadwick Elementary School, it was at the time where they built all these open classrooms. And then they had to go back and close them all, and they had mold problems, but they also had carpet everywhere. They had carpet even around the sinks in the classroom. So then that would get wet, and then it would get moldy, and we at least learned not to do that. It took us a long time. I think we're still learning, and still that's another thing we talked about with the NOC Commission is how do we need to build schools now so that in 40 years we don't have to tear it down and build a new one? You look at other areas of the country, they're in schools that are 100 years old, and those schools are functioning okay. We just have to be sure that we're building schools that are going to last more than 40 years, because we don't have any way to replace them that fast. Session starts on January 10th. I invite you all to come down anytime you want. And will the PTA do a PTA night this year, do you know?
Maryland PTA is doing their PTA night. It's in early February. I'm blanking on the date. Okay. We're also thinking about doing just a Montgomery County thing, but
we used to do, I don't know that you've done that in the last several years, but we used to do a night when we would get several different spots, and we would get like all the PTA people from like District 39, so you could get to meet with your legislators and talk to them, and we kind of clustered them together. But
we could think about doing something like that, or building energy around a particular issue or bill. If there was something we really need to get people to Annapolis for, to get people testifying in a hearing and providing written testimony, and so yeah.
Can I make a suggestion? I say this all the time, but we're all a pretty friendly bunch. If you can make the effort to get to know your legislator, your delegates and your senator, so that if an issue comes up, you can call them and tell them how you feel about something. I mean, I know when Lynn Harris calls, I'm going to sit down and listen. But the relationship, 99% of what we do in Annapolis is relationships. I always say that because it is. If you know your legislator, I'm not saying you got to be their best friend. Just get to know them well enough so that they know your face, they know who you are, and if you've got an issue, you can call them up and talk to them about it. We work on a committee basis in Annapolis. We have 4 committees in the Senate. Well, the people who are on the Judiciary Committee focus on judiciary issues. people on the finance committee, people on the what's the other one? I'm blanking. Well, that's, yeah, education, health, and the environment, finance, and the judiciary. But what happens is people get focused on the issues in their committee, and they don't focus on education issues. We just finished doing the questionnaire for MCEA for the election coming up. I had about half of our delegation calling me to ask me to help them fill out the form because they knew nothing about what was going on, because you just don't. You can't know everything over there. We like to say we do, but we don't know everything. So it's just really important for you to make your contact with those people, and you can call and talk to them. They'll pay attention, and they'll watch for those issues, and they'll vote better if you have made that contact with them. So.
Relationship building. If you've
Yes.
been in MCCPTA for a while, you've heard me say it 100 times. Get to know them before you want to ask them for anything.
And if you ever want me to come and just sit with you and talk about how you come to Annapolis and how you do testimony and what you do and what you don't do and that kind of thing, I've done that quite a bit with the municipalities and all that, just teaching people how to testify. So I'm happy to spend some time with you to do that. But it's just really important to come and let your feelings be known.
Any other questions?
You're welcome. Thank you.